You're listening to the Mind Your Own Business podcast, aimed at helping photographers learn how to make the leap from amateur to pro. Hello and welcome to the Mind Your Own Business podcast, a joint effort brought to you by Photofocus and Skip Cohen University. This is Shamir Young, and I am joined by my dynamic co-host, Skip Cohen. Skip.
Ooh, I got to be dynamic
You're
today.
very dynamic.
Hey, I'm being dynamic. We're into the cold season in Florida where flannel shirts come out at 65 degrees.
Oh, stop it.
So
come to Michigan.
You're
any
up
day.
north, yep, and our guest today is up north, and here we are whining in Florida. But then you put on flip-flops, so it makes no sense. So
Wow.
we got flannel shirts. We've got women out there with the Ugg boots and scarves and sock hats. And it's, come on, people.
I love
it's
it.
65 degrees.
I love it.
Bone chilling. Hey, we have a great episode today.
Yes, we do.
Yep, we do. We've got Joe McNally in the house. And for everybody out there, just in case you've been in solitary confinement for the last 20, 30 years, here's why everybody knows or should know Joe. Besides being a director, an author, a photographer, a storyteller, a phenomenal educator, and photographing literally all over the world. I know his website lists 70 countries, but I'll bet you it's more. He is simply a great guy, and he's a good friend to so many of us in the industry. Now, there's a quote in his bio that I want to read that I just love. Quote, "He is among the rare breed of photographer who has bridged the world between photojournalism and advertising. His client list is massive, but the number of us influenced by his images and style is even greater." So, Joe's joining us today. We're going to talk a little bit about how he got started. We're going to spend a minute or two on the challenges of the pandemic and what came out of that for Joe. And then we're going to talk a lot about Nikon's new Z9, which is phenomenal. So if I listed all of his accomplishments and awards, we would be out of time and there'd be no time for a podcast. So, Joe, this is the cue for your lips to move. Welcome to Mind Your Own Business, buddy.
Thank you both very much. And you're far too kind. Basically, all of what you just said, Skip, rolls into one simple fact. I've been a photographer for a long time, ups and downs, and all of the above.
Well, there's another piece though that comes out of it. You love what you do. Your passion is second to none, and there are days when it definitely feels like work, but there's that old line that I think Steve Jobs gets credited with a lot, that if you love what you do, you won't work a day in your life. And Confucius supposedly said it, and a few hundred years later, Steve Jobs came along and gets credit for it. But it's so true. You love what you do even when on those days when it's misery.
True. Yeah. I allowed myself the title of professional photographer in 1978, and I'm still doing it. And so that is, that's a good indication right there that I really do love this. Because if you don't love it, and that would be a cautionary note to young photographers out there, if you don't truly, deeply love doing this, then rethink, because it's not easy. Lots of folks out there, the technology and the pixels and this and that make it sound like the cameras will do everything for you, and this is quote unquote easy. The job of a photographer has never been easy, and it won't be in the future, no matter how technologically advanced we get.
Well, I remember you saying to a group of people when I was doing Skip Summer School that if you're in this because you think you're going to make millions, you were very open, and you talked about the highs and lows, and you talked about the lows where there might have been a month or two when you couldn't pay your staff, and then the highs where things all fell together. And it is a roller coaster, and you're right. Yeah, there's a line I've used a lot, that you can't create pictures that tug at people's heartstrings if your own heart isn't completely in it.
That's true. That's true. I had the benefit of growing up, with a lot of mentors, really powerful, wonderful photographers. And that was one thing they universally impressed on me, was that heart and soul, the best aspect of a picture, it could be beautiful and lustrous and pictorially wonderful and all of that, but the underlying strength of a picture is in the emotions.
I'm loving this already. Oh my goodness, Joe, I'm literally over here pinching myself having you on the show. This is so cool. So
Shamira, you are awesome. You remain awesome. The only thing I'll quibble with you about is you refer to Skip as dynamic. And I've known Skip a long time. And if we're going to get to dynamic, Skip's going to have to step it up a bit, I think.
Oh,
wow.
Direct challenge issued.
The gauntlet has been thrown down. And just to wrap it up, Joe, I want to thank you for being with us today.
It's been great talking to you guys.
This is going to be a party. I can tell already. Oh my goodness. So, Joe, could you kind of talk about, you were giving little tidbits there about your background. For any of those who may be living under a rock, can you briefly tell us how you got started doing what you're doing, how you went pro, and even some of the mentors that inspired you over the years?
Sure. Every photographer, that I wish that for every photographer, mentors and people who point the way. So I was very lucky. I had a great professor in school. I graduated from Syracuse University, and in a very foolish fashion, I headed for New York City thinking, New York is just waiting for me. Well, no, that wasn't the case. It was, a lot of hard knocks at first. I took a job as a copy boy at the New York Daily News, which is the lowest rung on the ladder of journalism. But it was New York's picture newspaper, and it introduced me to a whole world where I just was astonished on a daily basis how fast a big paper like that could move. When I joined the staff of the Daily News, again, not as a photographer, as a copy boy, there were nearly 60 staff photographers. That's how robust the place was. And I kind of went from there, newspapers, wire services, etc. And then my first full-time staff job was with ABC Television, which sounds really weird, but they have a big need for stills. And so I was assigned to all manner of stuff in color, which I had never shot before. So all of a sudden I had to learn lighting in color and did my best with that, had lots of failures, and progressed from there into magazines. And just, photographers, as I said earlier, it's not really a defined path. I've made a whole career out of doing whatever seems to be the next best thing to do.
Well, that totally makes sense, especially as times change and trends change and movements change. And so it's really important to be flexible. And that's apparently worked for you.
Yeah, flexibility, improvisation, and durability is not an oft discussed component of a photographic career, because everybody, dwells on the final product, the pictures, the stories, etc., the technology, all of that. But this is not a kind field in many ways. You have to weather some storms, both emotionally, financially, physically. And so durability, almost maybe even not durability, maybe a certain level of obstinacy, just plain stubborn, that you just are going to hang in there and keep doing this.
I love it.
Well, those ups and downs and that focus on just staying, I guess it's just staying dedicated and focused, leads me right into, I don't want to turn this into a pandemic podcast, but let's just talk just briefly about some of the things that came out of the pandemic that were on the plus side of whether it's your skill set or what you did to keep your sanity.
Sure. One was non-photographic. Annie and I started experimenting in the kitchen, and she's a fantastic cook, so we instituted pizza night. And that helped us get through, for sure. But beyond that, on the professional side, I tried to bear down. I tried to clean up my archive, which is, a monumental task and still ongoing. I wrote a book called The Real Deal, Field Notes from the Life of a Working Photographer, which is physically will be in stores in January. And I tried to learn some skills. I've been doing this a long time, and, the post-picture aspect of things has never been a strong suit for me. So I got involved with Capture One, which is absolutely an amazing program. I never knew the aftermath possibilities. I'd used it for many years as a tethering program, but never really used it for post-processing. And so I started to learn that, which was, skills. This is a business where you have to keep picking up skills. You can't get stale.
There are two things that came out of the pandemic, and you hit on one of them when we did the one of those first episodes of the F-64 Lunch Bunch, which was like March, April, right at the very beginning, and everything was shutting down. And I remember you talking about one of the benefits of this mess, although none of us knew how long it would go on, was just having time. And suddenly, all of us, whether you were an artist or a business owner, whatever it was, you had time to start to do things you hadn't done before. But then the other thing that came out of it is an absolute stronger, renewed sense of family, even for you and Annie doing pizza night. And by the way, if you haven't tried pizza on the grill, I'll talk to you about it later. It's
okay.
It's pretty phenomenal. But being able to tie that in with both family and creating memories and taking time to do some things. You got a book that came out of it. You picked up, you expanded your skill set. I remember years ago, the legendary Don Blair sitting in the back of a program that Nick Vidros was doing. And here he is he's probably about 75, 78, and he's taking notes. And I'm sitting there saying, what are you taking notes about? You know all this stuff. He said, no, I don't. And it's that ability to keep learning. And I guess that's what I love about this industry so much.
There's that, and also the fact that we all do, or many of us, most of us do, share information quite readily. And that's something I've always admired about the photo community, that experience gained is then transmitted. And I think that's a very positive aspect of our community.
Absolutely.
100%. And I would like to steer the conversation towards the new Nikon Z9, actually. I've seen online, Joe, that you called it the boss, which I love that. I love that. And there's been a lot of excitement in the industry about Nikon launching this pro-level mirrorless camera and just the way it handles real-time autofocus tracking and speed. Can you talk about that, especially since you're one of the first few photographers to actually get to use it? How has that been for you?
It was pretty great. I feel very lucky to have been selected to, participate in the early marketing of this camera. It is a beast. It is, as you said, a professional level mirrorless. This is a flagship mirrorless camera. And what goes along with that terminology is the build of the camera, tough as nails, weather sealed, all that sort of stuff. And then what people tend to focus on, or a huge area for folks in terms of like assessing a camera nowadays, of course, is autofocus performance. And this is clearly leaps and bounds the best autofocus I've ever used. I've heard the term a few times, and I think it's very apt. Some folks are calling it sticky. The camera is sticky. Like you throw that cursor, that AF cursor, it seeks out the eyes and it stays with the eyes. And so hence I think the term sticky is a pretty good one. And then there's the phenomenal speed of the camera coupled with, just great quality, 45.7 megapixels. This is a camera that will be my partner now. Because, I shot the Tokyo Olympics, and, I've been shooting very happily Z6 II, Z7 II, but at the Olympics, I shot a D6 all the way through. I had 4 D6s, which Nikon Professional Services gracefully loaned me when I got to Tokyo. And, at Olympics, it beat the living daylights out of a camera. And it reminded me of the robust feel of a flagship. And that, D6 is the DSLR flagship. But now Nikon has a flagship mirrorless, and I have the same feel, and that's really important to me.
Well, I remember at one point, I don't remember what project I was doing, but I sent you an email, and at that time you were in Brazil, sound right?
Yeah. Rio.
Yeah, Rio. You were in Rio. You were in Rio for the Olympics. And when I look at so much of your work, that fast autofocus has got to be significant. And when you were talking about a sticky feature, I mean, in the early days of websites, everybody talked about sticky pages on your website, meaning people kept coming back. And that is such a good explanation when you talk about a feature being sticky and being able to focus on the eyes and keeping it right there. What are some of the challenges that you can see it getting you through in terms of actual shooting situations?
Well, yeah, for instance, if I faced off with another Olympics right now, I would happily go with my Z9s and shoot the whole thing mirrorless. So, I say my Z9s, I don't have any. I was shooting prototypes, and sadly, at the end of your day, Nikon takes them back, which I think is, sort of mean, but no, you can't have them. You got to give them back in. And so I have 3 on order right now, and the sea change, Skip, you and I have been in this business for a long time, is when the Z system came out, when mirrorless first got introduced 3 years ago in the Nikon system, I had 8 Nikon DSLRs in my camera locker, 3 D5s, 3 D850s, and 2 D500s. And now I have 2, and so at first I was very hesitant, a little bit nervous about changing, my adjusting to the new form factor, the EVF, and all the technology that gets associated with mirrorless. But now here, this camera comes around, and it's got all the robust and sturdy quality of a flagship DSLR with all this new mirrorless stuff, the technology. And I can see it expanding the range of possibilities for any photographer out there. It kind of blows your imagination up in terms of what's possible.
Well, I don't photograph like you do at all. Most people know my passion is the business and marketing side, but I know more than I let on, having hung out with, so many guys like you, like Tony Corbell, Eddie Tapp. I mean, the reality is that I could do a portrait as good as Tony, but it would take Tony 10 minutes. It would take me 10 days. I'd finally get it. One of the things that I really liked in seeing the camera, and again, I've only seen it online, it's a stupid little thing for me, but I love the fact that depending on what kind of work you're doing, when you really do need to chimp, I love the fact that the touchscreen is on 4-axis now, so you can tilt it and shoot. If you're shooting vertical, you've got a rendition there. And I know that's small, and I know that's from a more amateur than professional's perspective, but it just seems like such an advantage for composition when you really do have to count chimping and see what you're doing.
Absolutely. No, it's not a small thing, really. When you turn the camera vertical, all the dialogue, all the information in the screen pivots vertically. So the whole thing just reorients itself to your particular, positioning of the camera. That's really, really time-saving and excellent. Think about, at an Olympics, for instance, when you position a remote camera, you oftentimes are clamping that camera to a railing or something under a stand, not an area you can get your head into and get your eye to the viewfinder very easily. So the versatility of that screen is huge. What I find also, too, is the speed, the interior speed of the camera. And I'm not going to get technical here because I can't, but I know the processing system inside the camera and the fact that it's simply almost impossible. Please, everybody, don't take this out of context. It's darn near impossible to buffer this camera, and, again, I won't get into technical specs, but the speed of it is amazing. And it keeps up with itself, inside, that everything is processing. Because I found shooting it that the image, in lots of EVFs, there's a split-second delay before the image you just shot pops up to your eye in the EVF. There's no delay here. Also, for the very first time in my career, I was able to track my subject without any loss of vision. With the shutter, the thing has no mechanical shutter. With shutter-driven cameras, there's always that blink where you don't see your subject. And I was tracking a race car in the desert that was going in excess of 150 miles an hour. And for the first time in my career, I never lost sight of it. That's crazy.
That's so cool. That's so cool. And I'm actually looking at, I see you have a video of, it looks like the race car. I'm seeing flames as well. Looks like it's in the desert.
Yes. Yeah, I still have a comic book for a brain. So, when I started, Nikon, when they approached me with the assignment, they said they had some boundaries they set up for me. They said, don't think about sports. We got sports photographers. We're covered. Think of something different. You've got an imagination. Put it to use. And so I called up a race car designer driver I had worked with some 10 years ago, and we made flames. We made smoke. I mean, the car looks like a missile laying there on the ground. And we were able to work it out that at the sunset times of the day, we were able to blow fire out of his exhaust pipes. I mean, the thing looks like it's out of, a post-apocalyptic movie.
It looks like a spaceship, for sure, for sure. And also on the same page, and I'm actually going to link to this in the show notes so that people can kind of check out your experience with the Z9. You also have it looks like a runner running at you, and he's dripping sweat, but I mean, the image is tack sharp. Can you tell us how it was shooting him?
Yeah, that's Will Credell. He's a wonderful Vegas-based performer. He's been in Lion King, and he's tremendous athlete. You can see from the way he's moving and his beautiful physique. So yes, I had him doing a variety of things, one of which was run at the camera and then just pop in the air indiscriminately. Like I wasn't giving him timing. I was like, okay, jump, none of that. I said, whenever you want to jump, just jump, because I want the camera to react and track you. And so the camera did. The camera found his eyes, and all during those runs, we had the proof of the pudding in this is, I can't believe I just said proof in the pudding. My mother used to say that. Anyway, moving along. But we had a Ninja attached to the Z9, and that tracked exactly what I was seeing in my viewfinder. And I have short clips of that, and you can see as he's running, jumping, coming down, and I kept my zoom at 400. I didn't retreat as he got closer. I kept it tight. He got tighter and bigger in the frame, and the AF box stayed right with his eye.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, the image it's outstanding. He's midair, literally. I mean, yeah.
It's crazy technology, and hats off to Will, because he was just a marvelous subject.
Well, one thing I'd love to go back to, not in more detail, but it's just another feature of the camera. When you start talking about 45.7 megapixels, one of the things that came up in my previous life, and this is back in medium format film days, was the advantage of medium format film and getting a sharp image was that you could take a roughly quarter-inch space of that negative when you had to crop. And I think there are a lot of young photographers today that don't understand that the benefit isn't just the fact that you can take an image and, God knows, blow it up to billboard size, whatever, and still be sharp, but the fact that you can isolate a segment of the image and still get incredible quality when you've got that kind of capture.
Sure. The detail of the camera is, again, it's just as robust as the build, the depth of the files. And I was dealing, with the car at sunset, I was dealing with a very dark desert floor, fading light in the western sky, flashes, colored smoke, flames, all sorts of disparity of exposure levels. And the camera just got its arms around it, and the files look amazing.
Love it.
So cool. And I can't help but ask. I mean, I'm looking at this page, but I obviously don't know, all of the subject matter that you've shot with the Z9. But do you have a favorite subject that you've shot so far that comes to mind?
With the Z9?
Yes.
Well, I guess, yeah. I mean, I had these very intense days in the desert, with the car and with Will. And then I did an assignment in conjunction with B&H Camera and Nikon with motocross and stuff like that. Ooh. But I have to confess, I love the desert. I love being out there and what I refer to as the big nothing and just creating something. So my favorite subjects by far are really the car, came close to what I had in my imagination, and Will actually surpassed my imagination, because when he got on the set, he was just so graceful and a super nice guy, first off. But, he was at the craft services table, eating, and all of us are sort of like staring at him. It was like very, impolite. But we're like, dude, man. And he's like, he shrugs. He goes, yeah, I eat whatever I want. And we're like, oh, man.
Must be nice.
That was pretty cool. I'm going to work with him again for sure, because he's Vegas based, and I work down in Vegas a great deal. I have a lot of friends who work with Cirque du Soleil and shows like that, and I've always loved the Vegas based talent because they're phenomenal in what they can create in front of the lens.
Too much fun.
Great place to be, yeah. So hitting on not just Vegas, but just talk about what's normally going to be, obviously the Z9. What focal lengths would you normally travel with? Because you can't take everything you have, or maybe you do. What do you normally love to travel with?
Well, there's three lenses. This was true of DSLR, and it's true now with mirrorless. Three lenses go with me all the time: 14-24, 24-70, 70-200. If I have those three lenses, I can basically cover the waterfront, unless something is, truly unusual. Now you're talking to somebody who once, I shot stories for National Geographic on the major telescopes of the world, and I once shipped 47 cases to Chile and drove them out in 3 different pickup trucks into the middle of the Atacama Desert and spent 3 weeks lighting the very large telescope. So that to the side, that was never to be repeated again. I'm just that kind of work just is in the past. But, the mirrorless cameras themselves create an advantage because they are a bit lighter and you can fit more of them, say, in a roller bag. So if I go out, I'll have, some lights and stands and tripod and this and that. But basic lenses, those 3 I just mentioned. If I want to do something like cool and like really experiment, my 200 f2, which is a f-mount lens, goes with me, and that fits beautifully onto the adapter that Nikon created for the mirrorless system. Super sharp f2. That lens is maybe the sharpest telephoto I've ever used.
Wow.
Did that answer the question, or I just
no, it's great, but it's great stuff because
uselessly.
No, but this is like this is like some knucklehead at a press conference who wants to know what her favorite celebrity's color is.
Yeah.
The reality is, in terms of travel, there's so many photographers who you've influenced over the years, and they don't understand that your secret ingredient is the passion and love for the craft, and hopefully at some point they develop it. But they follow you, they emulate what you're doing, and they want to try and somewhere out there is the next young Joe McNally waiting to move in and be, oh God, as instrumental in influencing so many people in the industry as you've been. At the same time, and this goes back a little bit to the pandemic, and I know we're just about out of time, the pandemic obviously limited an awful lot of travel. Have things opened up enough yet that you're able to be back out there on those assignments all over the world?
Well, to a degree, with limitations. COVID is going to be with us for a while. It's become part of our lifestyle, I guess you could almost describe it. I went to Tokyo amidst many regulations. I was only allowed outside of my hotel for 15 minutes at a clip to go down to the Family Mart on the corner and get my sandwiches. I lived on sandwiches for 30 days. And also now back here, we shot the Z9 out in the California desert. The whole crew went from East Coast to West Coast. We had to get tested. We landed in LA. We got tested again. We formed the best bubble we could. Everybody on the set had to produce proof of, vaccination and negative testing. I mean, it just is part of what you do. So yes, the answer is it is opening up. Assignments are taking place. Things are getting busy, albeit with this, layer that you have to put on top of every assignment, which is COVID precaution, which I'm a big fan of. You have to stay safe out there. You have to keep your crew and your talent safe. So anything you need to do, you do.
Hey, just before we wrap it up and Shamara has her last question, I did have one more. Just let's talk briefly about, you've got a new book out. It's going to be available in January. What's in the new book?
It's a good question. It's not a how-to book in the traditional sense of the word. My editor and I talked about it. It's more of a country road, that you would take through the life of a photographer. And there's a lot of anecdotal information in there, and learning, and humor, hopefully, and just realization of the kind of tilts and swings you have to go through to stay behind the camera. So it's really an anecdotally based, compendium of stories of what a photographic life really is like.
Where will it be available?
It'll be in bookstores across the board, the usual suspects, and in January. The ebook is available now at Amazon and also the Rocky Nook publishing house. They're the publishers, and they have their own portal as well.
Oh, wonderful.
Very cool. I'll have to look it up on Amazon and include a link in the show notes to that as well, so people can check it out.
Absolutely. I think it's a fun read. I will say that.
It sounds like
it was a long time coming. My editor was very patient with me. I think I signed a contract to do the book like 5 years ago.
No better time than the present, especially now. So, and it's crazy how fast these interviews go. We are coming to the end of our time here, but I do want to sneak in my favorite final question, which is always so interesting given our unique times right now. Joe, what advice would you have for photographers who are just starting out? What would you tell them, I guess, to do as a first step, as far as inspiration or business or wherever you want to take the question?
Sure. It's a question, an answer that could come back in any number of pathways, business or inspiration, et cetera, as you indicate, Shamara. But oddly enough, I would encourage young photographers to read a lot, to be aware of the world, and really dive into the history of this field and see the work that has gone before. It will inform your path as you go forward. And there's lots of other stuff, right? You have to be successful business-wise. You have to create a good portfolio, all that sort of stuff. And you've heard all of the, advice. It's a marathon, not a sprint. All of that stuff remains true. But the ability to embrace the world, be knowledgeable of it, see what moves you and what motivates you to go do stories is really important. And also the ability to write a proposal, to move someone in a positive direction so that they actually give you money to go shoot some pictures. That's not an easy thing to do anymore. I grew up in an era where magazines assignments dropped from trees. And that is over. A lot of those magazines are gone. And so publishing as a photographer has taken on a whole different path. And multi-talented photographers will rise, I think. Again, I'm probably going on too long here, but when I grew up photographically, I had to learn how to do one thing well, tell good stories visually, which in itself is hard. But young photographers have to learn website design, audio, video, stills. They have to be savvy on the web. They have to know how to market themselves. All those things wrap into the bundle that I kind of refer to as a mosaic, really of a photographer's life. It's lots of bits and pieces.
It's kind of interesting as you went through what photographers need to know, with the exception of the marketing and business. The Z9 covers it. If they can figure out how to build a marketing piece of software into the camera, No, never mind. It wouldn't work anyway.
If only.
Moving.
If only.
Yeah, moving. If only.
Oh, very cool. Well, Joe, I do want to make sure and ask, where can folks find you online to check you out in general?
Sure. I'm on Instagram, Joe McNally Photo. Pretty straightforward. And my website is joemcnally.com. And that was another thing we did during the pandemic. We updated, cleaned up, and basically created a whole new website.
Fantastic. We'll make sure and link to that in the show notes so that people can check it out.
Sure.
And Skip, where can folks find you?
It's always the same answer. Everything I write is at skipcohenuniversity.com. You'll also find me at skip@mei500.com. That's my email address. And we encourage all of you guys out there, if you've got a suggestion or a guest or a theme you'd like to have us look for and investigate in terms of a podcast, we'd love to hear from you. I'm also Skip Cohen on Twitter and Skip Cohen on Facebook. Nothing particularly clever in finding me there. It's just my name. And Shamira, I always ask you the same question, where they go to find you.
Yes, folks can send me an email at shamira@photofocus.com. That is my first name, CHAMIRA @photofocus.com. We love getting questions, ideas, and feedback because it shapes how we move forward with this show. And Joe, I just can't thank you enough. This has been awesome. You gave
great
fantastic
stuff.
advice.
Oh, well, thank you both. You've both been very gracious and great questions and a lot of fun just kind of bantering things around.
Good stuff, yes. And we also want to thank our listening audience for joining us. Please tell your friends about this podcast, especially if they want to bring their photography business up to the next level as we move into 2022. We look forward to having you all with us next time on the Mind Your Own Business podcast, brought to you by Photofocus and Skip Cohen University.